Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Star Trek Discovery is a Star Trek show about the USS Discovery and its first officer, Michael Burnham, and an ongoing plot about an anomaly made of glowy red things in space, an angel, and some other mumbo-jumbo. Episode 2, New Eden, picks up straight after last week, with Michael showing the message left by our foster brother Spock to Captain Pike. He's a bit surprised to see Spock was drawing the anomaly months before it was actually discovered, but he also knows that Spock's actually checked himself into a mental hospital and didn't want his family informed, but he tells Michael anyway. But then, another anomaly signal sort of disappears and pops up, and they have a hard time locating it, but Tilly has a plan using science and a bit of hyperactivity. But Michael has a better idea, so they do a mini warp jump speed, and then that lets them figure out where it was. And it turns out it's 150 years away at maximum speed, out in the middle of the Beta Quadrant. Luckily, they've still got the spore drive, so after some encouragement, Stamets gets plugged in and they do a mushroom telescope right off to the planet. But when they get there, there's no anomaly. In fact, there's nothing much happening at all. There's just a loop distress call coming from a Class M planet. That's like Earth. And however, they end up going and looking down at it, and it turns out that it's like some kind of Pilgrim-era rural community, but everything seems to be fine. Nothing's wrong. No problems. Everyone's happy. So they head down in period gear, planning to investigate it, and they find the church from the end of Lost, and that's where the signal's coming from. Or it's not really the one from Lost, but it looks like it. But it's all multi-faith with a big creepy angel design on a stained glass window. Anyway, the yokels turn up, but it's all cool, and they get to chat to them. And then, although Burnham's undercover game needs an awful lot of work, because she's all I believe in the science, yo. Her Luddite pal and the captain try to act a bit normal, so their cover doesn't get blown. And it seems that their ancestors of these people left Earth during World War III, but they don't know how they got to this planet, and they've got no tech, so they just assume that Earth was destroyed. So the away team decide that they're going to stay the night in the church, but a local whose family believes in spaceships and stuff manages to catch them at doing future things, and he throws a stun grenade at them. And back on the Discovery, Tilly tries to do science with the asteroid they got last week, but without she actually bothering to ask anyone who knows things about engineering and science and stuff. But it seems to work, although it ends up going a little bit wrong, and then she ends up getting blown up and bounced off some props. But she wakes up a bit later on in the sickbay, and there's a very bad actress appears to encourage her in a totally normal way, really normal and sensible. And then Saru and the doctor walk past her just like she isn't even there. And they tell her off for being a bit daft. And Saru kind of relents a bit when she explains what she was trying to do and trying to help because, reasons and stuff. But not everything's fine, because it turns out that, the planet's actually about to go horribly wrong and bad and all toxic death, and they've only got about 1 hour because more reasons. And because a ticking clock plot point is actually, a pretty lazy way to raise the stakes in a TV show. Anyway, Tilly has about 10 espressos, and then she starts wishing that Burnham was there to help her think it all through, because of course she does, because Burnham can do anything. And then the Indian wifey reappears and starts helping her to talk through it. And then, Tilly suddenly gets a great idea and she runs off to the bridge, the wrong way. And it is hilarious, and absolutely nobody laughs. And when she gets to the bridge, they actually listen to her, even though she's wearing pajamas and is probably concussed. But she has a really good idea for using the asteroid to manage to do a special thing to take away all the bad, nasty bits that are floating around the planet. And she talks to the pilot lady and convinces her that what she needs to do is a donut. Yes, people from the 24th century still talk about doing donuts, even though they don't actually drive cars. But anyway, so they do that, and of course it works out fine. And meanwhile on the planet, the away team all wake up and they manage to escape, and they stop the believer guy before he can show off all the tech to the leader lady. But then a wee kid somehow picks up a phaser and manages to make it go all explodey, and Pike heroically falls on top of it and almost gets dead. So Michael says that they need to go back to the church to pray for a miracle. And as soon as they get in the door, they shut themselves in, and they beam away just as the doors open, so the people think it's some kind of miracle. And back on the Discovery, Tilly's trying to remember who the nice Indian lady is, and dun dun dun, it turns out she only died years ago. So who is she? I mean, was she alive? Is she dead? Is she just a voice inside Tilly's head? What can it all mean? But anyway, Pike's, sitting trying to work out what's going on after he's get woken up with a couple of broken ribs, and Michael decides to trust him and tell him how she actually saw the Red Angel last week, but she thought it was a hallucination because she had her sore leg and everything. But anyway, he's curious. So what does all that mean? And then he beams down and tells the man in the church the truth, which is all that man wanted. And then they end up having a bit of a trade, and he gives him a power source in exchange for a camera from the olden times that was lying around, and that lets him power up the church lights and restore hope for all the people in the community. Back on the ship, Pike charges up the camera, and what does he see? He sees a red angel. What does it all mean? I'm sure we'll find it next week or a few weeks afterwards. So what did I think? Well, I think this week was a wee bit up and down for me. I mean, I don't even mean how they beamed up and down off the planet quite so much. I mean, in like kind of the way that this felt a little bit like classic Star Trek. I mean, the whole plot of them finding an old-timey planet in the middle of space that no one knows about, and everyone lives in a way that's old-fashioned and quite cheap to film. I mean, that is essentially about as Star Trek as you can actually get. I mean, half of the original series was basically just that. And also, like Tilly and her shenanigans in the cargo bay. I mean, that had kind of a next generation feel to it. And they even managed to have some time that was like philosophizing on the nature of religion and technology, and using that a little bit to build a little bit of character interaction between Burnham and Pike. That all felt pretty good and Star Trekky. And I also like the fact that the bridge crew actually are getting a chance to do something. I mean, we got all their names last week, but now we're actually getting to find out a little bit more about them. I mean, we found out that Joanne turns out she grew up in like a Luddite colony. I mean, they didn't really explain that, but they mentioned it, and she actually got to go on the away mission, and she helped out theoretically, although she didn't actually really do much. She just kind of stood around while everybody else did all the talking. But we're actually getting to see these people do stuff, so maybe they'll have episodes later on. And then Demter, like the pilot, she got to do some flying tricks and donuts and stuff. I mean, that's the beginning of a start of a character. But I mean, okay. I mean, I have to say that this episode it wasn't bad, but it was kind of flimsy. I mean, it was a little bit. Like, I mean, in some ways, it kind of felt almost like an episode of the Orville. Like they'd taken the structure of the Orville, and the problem with the Orville is the Orville's basically the next generation, but made really simplified with a lot of jokes. Whereas this kind of felt like that kind of structure in writing, but in the middle of a serious drama show. And again, it felt a bit weird. And I'm not saying that I don't think the show should try and be a little bit like the Orville, because I mean it's a much better show. But I think in some ways, if they're going to make a show complex, make it complex. But down to my real grumps. Okay, let's go for starters. Half the episode was about Tilly, who apparently thinks it's okay to start lasering like a giant asteroid that's got a super gravity well around it that basically could tear the ship into pieces. Like she thinks that's a good idea to do it on her own with a wee squeeze box thing, which presumably isn't a set standard procedure. And even if it was, she's obviously not doing it right because I mean, like the wee bit floats off and like nearly breaks a table, but that could have like, destroyed all sorts of things or possibly killed her. And I get that she's a little bit flighty and a bit crazy, and the whole point is I mean sometimes her autism seems to like trump her need to follow the rules. I mean I appreciate that they've actually gone to the effort of actually writing a character that's like on the spectrum and definitely at the higher end of the spectrum. But I mean, making people make daft allowances for they doing these things when she could have like blown up the whole ship, that's where I start having a bit of a problem with it. And the fact is, I mean, she hadn't really thought through she was doing. I mean, as I said, that bit flew off and it could have ended up killing someone, and she's lucky it didn't. But the same way, I mean, there was also the fact that when she woke up and like her weird sort of imaginary school pal popped up, and I've got to be honest, so my apologies to the actress, you were terrible in this role. I mean, I don't know, the line delivery was awful. I don't know what was going on. Don't know if it was direction, if it was a line, if it was just the way that take was bad. But honestly, some of it was just terrible, and it was obvious that she wasn't real. I mean, and I don't want to drop any spoilers for anything else and I'm not going to. So I'll just say that like the idea of a character who isn't real, like but only exists in the main character's head, but the main character doesn't realize, is something that's been done more than a few times in a bunch of shows and films over the last 10 years. And it's usually done quite clunkily because, let's face it, a lot of TV and filmmaking isn't that well written. But this wasn't much of an exception. I mean, rung up really as obvious as soon as she appeared because she just appears out of nowhere and suddenly starts speaking to her the second she opens her eyes. And then, like, that first line felt like sounded almost a bit weird. And then, like, the doctor and Saru walked in and just out of nowhere, like, she just sort of disappears off screen and they never look at her. I mean, that was a total giveaway. I mean, behave yourself, Discovery. You're not that clever. You're not that innovative. And the real killer for me this week, there wasn't even that. It was the writing. I mean, the writing overall was kind of horrid. Now, I mean, sure, there was some good stuff. Like I said, the wee Clark's Law conversation and the religious versus science stuff. I mean, that was interesting. But they didn't really take much of it anywhere. It started off and it got really simple and facile. And character stuff and scene to scene moments, I mean, they can get clunky and baffling as well. But I mean, think about the plot. The anomaly appears and they can actually try and go after it. But they can't find it, but they know it's there because they've managed to pick one up. But how have they managed to pick one up, but they can't figure out where it is? They can't even figure out what direction it's in. They can't even figure out which part of the galaxy it's in. Like, they can't find it at all. Like, at all? Or maybe a little bit at all. And then Tilly has this idea, but then Burnham in 2 seconds like knows that's not going to work and has a better idea. And then then they do it and it works and everyone smiles at her, of course. And then they figure out eventually it's 150 years away at the other side of the galaxy. But they couldn't figure that part out. They couldn't figure out that it was very far away. I mean, we can't quite lock onto it. Usually means we can kind of figure it out to within a bit. I I mean, if someone turns around and says, "Oh, I heard a noise," you'd say, "Well, where's it coming from?" Or you'd be like, "Well, at least it's coming from over there." And it's clear that a lot of this was just so that they could have a bit of a, what can we do here? Oh, look, Michael figured it out, because Michael needs to have a hero moment every sort of 20 minutes. And that's actually kind of annoying me. And I'll get to that a bit more later. But the other side of it was the rules and the fact that Pike seems to be willing to break anything for the mission. Now, the mission was something that last week was so poorly explained that it didn't come across as sounding that important. I mean, he came in and he had that whole there's 3 reasons that I can take over the ship sort of thing. Then he basically said, oh yeah, there was some red lights that appeared in the galaxy a couple of times. So we thought, well, that can't be just by accident. And then the Enterprise broke. And we think that might be related. And at that point, it was like, right, so why does that make it ultra priority? I mean, you haven't established that there's a danger, or if you have, then you're not telling it to people. And the crew is already mistrustful after everything that Lorca did. But now we've got, like, the point where he's willing to, like, ignore Spock's medical history privacy. Like, literally, he's just telling, like, against Spock's wishes, he's telling Spock's adopted sister that, he's been locked up in a mental asylum, even though he specifically asked not to have his family told. It's okay, because the mission is more important.
His association with these signals outweighs his desire for absolute privacy.
And then the same thing happens later when suddenly they can't use the spore drive because that's been banned and Starfleet said we shouldn't. And he says, well, that's okay because the mission is more important.
Getting to the bottom of these signals is of utmost importance to the Federation. They let you use the drive to fight the Klingons. They'll give us dispensation now.
And then later on, Saru just decides literally out of no reason at all that they're going to just save this planet, when they have no particular reason to, without actually checking. And I know that Saru is, acting captain, but I mean, normally people would discuss this with someone first, if this is a good idea, if it's a bad idea, should we even bother? But they don't. And at that one, I'll maybe let that one slide. But then straight after that, like, Pike's like, oh, it's okay, we can break the Prime Directive because, the mission. It's lazy, lazy, lazy writing. And frankly, the only mission that's that important is the one with Robert De Niro in it. Another thing that bugged me is like the fact that, like last week, as I said earlier, Michael is always right. Even when Michael's wrong, Michael's right. Also, it's just weird. I mean, like, let's face it, the Prime Directive should be a logical choice for her. So does she even logic? Why is she so against the idea of letting these people live their lives and not interfering with them? Why is she arguing that they should tell these primitive people the truth and take them home to Earth, even though they're quite happily have been living here for 200 years? And they believe their own belief systems and they're basically their own planet and own people now. But she thinks they should take them home. It didn't make sense because out of everybody, the Vulcan, well, no, I mean, she's not Vulcan, but the person who was brought up on Vulcan to believe logic above all should be the person who actually has less of a problem with this. I mean, the emotional people should be doing that. And I know that the whole point is, she's supposed to be emotional and stuff, but it just rang completely false to me. And sure, I mean, it gives an opportunity for her and Pike to debate, but the show also makes sure to show that, she would have been right anyway because the planet was going to die. And, even though she didn't know that, it means that Michael was right in the first place. And she was right all along because that's, just how it works because Michael is always right. And then when, Pike finally does come clean with the guy, he's all happy and everything works out for the best because Michael was right. And it baffled me also because Pike was hurt and she just turns around and goes, he's dying, out of nowhere. I mean, what, she's a medic now, she's a doctor. I mean, she's a science expert, but she's also a crack pilot, she's an action hero, and now she's a medic as well. Is there literally anything that Michael Burnham can't do? I mean, honestly, at this point, we should probably just change her name from Michael Burnham to Mary. So until next time, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.